Hi, everybody. As always, we'll start with a plant tonight. This one is the black sage, also known as Salvia mellifera. It ties into our show very well this evening. I personally love this sage, although it maybe is slightly an unsung hero in the horticultural use of sages, not quite as flashy as some of the Clevelandii sage cultivars. But I think it's a great plant, and it grows very abundantly all over our local hills, along the hiking trails, in the local gardens. And to me, it's the most aromatic and beautiful smelling sage. I like to use it to make lemonade every spring. And this is the time of year when it's most abundant and ready to be harvested. So it'll tie in the themes of today's episode very well. Welcome, everybody. I'm Evan Meyer, Executive Director at Theodore Payne Foundation. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Margaret Oakley, and welcome to Poppy Hour, everyone. Hey, Margaret.
Hi, Evan. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our season finale of Poppy Hour. We did 8 experimental episodes through Zoom and YouTube on the internet. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I want to thank our sponsors. So the Gottlieb Native Garden sponsored the entire first season of Poppy Hour, and we're going to be visiting this garden for the first segment of this show tonight. By the way, we're running a little longer. Probably will be finished closer to 7 to give you a heads up. So I'll be telling you more about the wonderful Gottlieb Native Garden soon, but I wanted to note that Susan Gottlieb shared this photo of her meadow, which is my Zoom background. It's one of her favorite spots in the garden right now. So we'll talk more about that. Thank you, Susan. And I want to express our gratitude to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power for sponsoring this whole first season of Poppy Hour, and for promoting outdoor water efficiency through their $3 per square foot turf replacement rebate, which is still happening. Visit ladwp.com/landscaping for turf replacement rebate program details and garden resources. There you can access virtual garden tours and learn more about workshops to help improve your outdoor water efficiency. You can also apply directly for your turf replacement rebate at SoCalWatersmart.com. And thank you to Metropolitan Water District of Southern California for sponsoring the entire first season of Poppy Hour through their community partnering program. Native plants are the perfect candidates for Metropolitan's turf replacement rebate, available throughout Southern California. Check out native plant profiles, take a virtual tour of the Colorado River Aqueduct, and apply for water-saving device rebates at bewaterwise.com. And now I'd like to introduce Philip, who has helped to direct Poppy Hour this season. Hi, Philip.
Hi, Margaret. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who is joining us tonight and who has joined us for our first season over these past 8 weeks. It's been really fun to do this, especially during this really unique time that we find ourselves in. So thank you so much for being part of this community that we're building together. We do aim for Poppy Hour to be a collaborative really conversation. So there's a couple different ways you can participate. If you're joining us tonight on Zoom, feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function, or you can also type questions into the chat box. And if you are watching us on YouTube, certainly please join in the conversation that's going on there. And I'll be doing my best to answer questions there and either get them answered, online during the show, or if not, I'll try to, follow up with you offline. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm going to pass things back to Evan. Oh, sorry, one more thing briefly. If you haven't already done so, please follow us on YouTube and the rest of our social media channels. It's actually really helpful to us, and it's a really great way to stay connected. So if you're on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, please go ahead and follow Theodore Payne All right, back to Evan.
Thanks, Philip, and thanks, Margaret. And thanks to everyone who's tuned in for these episodes of Poppy Hour. This was totally an experiment, as Margaret said, and it's been really fun to just kind of dig deep into the native plants and the ways, the myriad ways that they are part of our lives. So I've learned a lot and met some great people along the way, and I look forward to doing more stuff like this in the future, and hopefully doing stuff in person, so we don't have to be staring at computer screens, but we can actually connect in real life at some point soon. So thank you to everyone who is watching now, will be watching in the future, or has watched any of the episodes. We really appreciate you guys participating in this with us. So I've got a couple things to go through. I want to start by just saying that we'll be talking about some Indigenous community issues and how native plants and food relate. So I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the Tataviam and Tongva Indigenous communities as the land that we're on now here at Theodore Payne Foundation and throughout Los Angeles. And I'm really excited about that conversation. I'll start by just doing a couple of things that we have to talk about tonight. So this kind of final episode, we wanted to go out with a bang. So we have three amazing guests, and we found out that this is really the author episode. So I'm going to start with this book, which I'll share, Cooking the Native Way, Chia Café. These are teasers for the second and third guest. Then we have Discovering Griffith Park, a local's guide, Casey Schreiner. And all these books are available in our bookstore, by the way, available for online order. And this one that I really want to talk about, Gottlieb Native Garden, The California Love Story, an absolutely gorgeous book about the garden that we're about to see. The Gottlieb Native Garden has been so generous in sponsoring Poppy Hour, and they've added to that generosity by making this book available while supplies last to all plant takeout orders over $100. So I know it's getting late in the season to plant, but there are definitely riparian plants and annuals that will still do great. And if you're planting in containers, and even if you just have a little more time because you're at home more now, you can still get away with planting a lot of natives. So any order over $100 will get a free Gottlieb Native Garden book, a very beautiful book. And so that kind of ends the intro for me. I just, again, thank you so much to everyone. Stay tuned for updates from TPF. We are madly figuring out a lot of details about when we can reopen and things like that. And we'll share them as soon as we know more. We're just really putting all of our efforts into making sure that the community is safe while they're here, and the shopping experience is pleasant and not kind of scary or crazy. So we're really going to take our time with it. And in the meantime, you can order plants through our plant pickup system and our online store. And that will also be getting a revamp soon. So stay tuned, a lot of exciting things. Many thanks. Let's get going with the episode. Margaret, where are we headed?
All right, this is so great, our author episode. So we're going to start at the Gottlieb Native Garden. Our first guests are Susan Gottlieb and naturalist Scott Logan. So I just wanted to introduce this garden quickly to say that, I've worked on the garden tour for over a decade, and the Theodore Payne Foundation has been fortunate to include Gottlieb Native Garden for almost every year for the 17-year history of the Native Plant Garden Tour. I think Susan had some family commitments one year, and we got a lot of complaints that the garden wasn't on the tour. It's a perennial favorite for people to visit each and every year, and it's frequently been called the Hummingbird Garden. That's kind of one of the aliases, because charms of hummingbirds, and a charm is the collective term for a group of hummingbirds, they hang around this landscape due to the numerous feeding sources that this garden provides to them. And it's a very magical experience to be surrounded by a charm of hummingbirds. As I've been stating in my sponsor reads at the start of each show, this is a flourishing California native plant ecosystem located just a few miles from Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. And I think this is a really significant point because Susan is working really hard to set a trend for people with ample resources and large properties to prioritize using native plants in those landscapes. So Susan and Darren Gottlieb began this project more than 25 years ago. And in this conversation, we will learn more about this thriving native plant ecosystem and the wildlife that it supports. I would add just quickly on the book note that a new second book about this garden is coming out, featuring Scott's photography of the wildlife that visit and rely upon this botanical wonderland. So welcome, Susan and Scott. Thank you both so much for joining us. Susan, I was wondering if you could start by telling us about why you started this native landscape, the story of the garden.
Well, I started it because it was really a water conservation project initially, and started putting in drought-tolerant plants and learning about drought-tolerant plants. And while doing that, I started to learn about native plants and the reason for using them. And it was a big learning curve for me because I didn't know gardening. So, but it's been great fun, and it became a passion, obviously. And I started it over here on this hillside in 1990. So this hillside is pretty much covered with Encelia californica right now, as you can see. And the Matilaha poppies are in season right now as well. There's a lot of quail bush up here, and it's been here for a long time. So it's pretty mature. The Mimulus guttatus, there's a new name for it now. I don't remember what it is. But,
Diplacus, but that's fine. We all remember Mimulus, yes.
Well, it's kind of taken over our waterfall here beautifully, and it's starting to go to seed now. So there's a little bit of stinging nettle in there, which I put in some years ago to attract butterflies. The primrose here has also taken over pretty well as every year, and that is a good plant for the white line sphinx moth. Up on the top of the hill is a big mesquite tree just starting to go into bloom. I put
Nice.
it is really a beautiful thing.
We should mention in our next segment, Abe Sanchez will be showing us pods and things that he makes with the beans from mesquite. So it's great to see what that tree looks like here.
Yeah. Over to the right here, we've got the native wild grape growing quite nicely for the first time ever. I've had the grape in the yard for a long, long time, but it never has produced any grapes. So we put it over here for a change, and maybe that'll help us. Over here, that little meadow that's behind, the picture of the meadow that's behind Margaret is right here now. This is it. And you can see it has changed as it's gone through the spring. It's now, a lot of the things are going to seed, and I don't want to to start cleaning things up until I can gather the seed. But I see over here that the Eriogonum rubescens has started to come into bloom, and that's going to be beautiful pretty soon. We had a lot of really beautiful white mallow this year. All in other places besides this, this year was really good for that. And I'm going to take you over here to this little fountain, which we also talked about during the tour earlier on. But the streamside orchids are blooming right now, and that's them right there. And they really do take over, because this little fountain splashes. There's also more of that stinging nettle right here too, so be careful. And Scott was going to talk about this fountain a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about the importance of water features in the garden.
Yeah, so Susan has many water features in the garden. This one happens to be really unique because it's extremely shallow, and it has a good a little bit of moving water in the middle, and that's exactly what birds like, especially hummingbirds. This fountain gets used all day long by hummingbirds, and occasionally large groups of hummingbirds will use it in the morning and the afternoon. And it really comes down to how shallow it is. Some people think that bird baths need to be very deep, but very shallow is great for birds. And again, I'll just emphasize what Susan was saying. This fountain does splash a little bit, but you can just use that to your advantage and plant something that is happy living in very moist soil.
Yeah, I've got some columbine over there too. They'll bloom later. So anything that likes a little extra water does well over here.
You can sneak in those riparian water-loving plants next to your splashing fountains.
Yeah.
So I know you have this epic staircase that goes down your back hillside. And I was thinking, as you are leading us over there, you could tell us a little bit about the history of that hillside landscape. My understanding is that it did not have many natives at all when you first moved into this property. Is that correct?
I think that the only native it had, well, there might have been some toyon down farther, but there was a black walnut tree on that hillside over there, I believe. No, I think I put one in actually. There were some black walnuts down farther. But that's the only thing that I remember was native. Pretty much everything was covered with ivy. So we're going to go down the stairs here. There's a lot of this giant buckwheat here. The thing that's sort of standing out right now, though, are the Romney coulteri, these Matilla poppies.
Beautiful.
We have some beautiful penstemon right here. The color is unbelievable, especially when the sun is on it. And there's a lot of the Gambelia gensea. I mean, it has really sort of taken over the garden in some places. I love the way the Ancelia has sort of just decided to sit on the bench here. Look at that, isn't that great?
Oh.
We've got some Lonicera, some honeysuckle up there that's blooming, which is thrilling to me because we've been struggling to get that to happen for a number of years, and there's more of it down farther. So I'm really thrilled about that. This Artemisia has gone rogue, I think. It's so huge now. I don't know. I guess all the rain maybe was just at the right time of year or something, but it's never been this big before. So we're all very happy about that.
So that's Artemisia californica.
And this is my little
California sagebrush, which maybe we'll talk about with Casey as a good hiking trail plant.
Sorry, Margaret. Oh.
Yeah, we're having your video and audio is freezing and cutting out as you move down a little bit. But now we're caught up to you.
Down. Okay, so right next to me is a verbena patch here.
Verbena Lacina.
So we're going downstairs. We're reaching this, I guess we'd call this the first main landing here. We have a little gizmo here that Scott uses to catch bugs, and he'll tell you about that, I think. How are we doing, Margaret?
Yeah, you're doing great. So maybe this is a good moment, great. Scott, if you're available. I'm not sure who's holding the camera. Yeah, tell us about this interesting bug trap and what you're exploring.
So what this is it's a passive light trap, and essentially UV light goes on at night, and insects are attracted to it. They fall down into the bucket, and the next day I check out to see who's in there. We get a lot of really interesting things in there, and we can see the different how things change throughout the seasons of how the insects are changing. Also, the abundance of certain insects like moths and beetles and so on. We can even take a look inside to see what's in there from yesterday.
That would be great. One of the
Yeah, there's actually some very cool, let's see here.
Oh, okay.
So here's some beetles that were trapped from last night.
Oh, look at that.
so there's
Oops.
they're
Uh-oh.
still alive.
Can you see those?
Do you release them, Scott?
Oh yeah, the trap doesn't kill them. I mean, I guess the name trap implies might kill them, but it doesn't. This particular beetle here is a black bearing beetle, has a very interesting life cycle that the mites that live with it. Without the mites, it would not, its life cycle could not be completed, and nor could the mites' life cycle be completed. So it's a very cool beetle.
One of the things I really love about this garden project is that it's, of course, the native plants are the foundation of the ecosystem, but we are able to learn so much about the wildlife and sort of the larger ecological connections. So Scott, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do and maybe some of those significant wildlife studies that are happening in the garden right now?
Yeah, so basically what I've been doing here for the past, now coming up on 6 years, is cataloging the species of animals using the garden and seeing if the plants themselves, all the native plants, has made an impact in the species diversity. What do we have there?
I think it's feeding its young.
Oh, and there's a lot of young and a lot of young birds in the garden right now, and a lot of young birds being fed around us at the moment. But I think the most impressive thing is the species diversity that the garden is now producing, and I've been able to get down to species level over 450 animals. That's from ants all the way up to mountain lions. And it's very clear that that diversity is here because of the diversity of plants that are here. You wouldn't have that in a garden that doesn't have native plants that these native animals evolved with. I think one of the coolest things are the mammals. So this is a yard that's basically in the middle of Los Angeles, and we have 27 mammal species that have used the yard. And out of those 27 mammal species, 9 of them are bats. And the bats are coming here every evening because the garden is producing food for them, flying food for them. So it's just all part of the chain where the plants are feeding the animals. It goes far beyond the beauty of a native garden. It's really helping wildlife. And as everybody creates these gardens, they're creating a patchwork where these animals can hopscotch through the city. So it's a very, very positive thing. I know one point out thing is up over here we have a solitary bee house. Basically, it's kind of like apartments for solitary bees. It's habitat that you can put out for them to nest in. And that's what a native garden is so great for, is the diversity of animals you can get, and that includes bees. I think LA County has over 500 species of bees.
While you've got your camera over there, I just wanted to point to that hillside over there, the bare hillside. That's our neighbors. For the last 2 or 3 years, we have been offering to do their fire suppression clearing, because we didn't want them using a weed whacker on the hillside and killing all the volunteers that were growing on their property. I don't even know that they realize what we're up to, but they're very happy to have us do it. So we're thrilled, because we just feel like, you know, somebody was saying in the last episode of the Poppy Hour that they were planting seeds on empty property. And I forget the term was that Margaret used for that.
Kind of guerrilla gardening
like we're kind
style.
of doing the same thing here. Guerrilla gardening, that was it,
Yeah.
So that's guerrilla gardening over there.
Guerrilla gardening in Beverly Hills. I love it.
That's right. Down this hillside here, you can see a lot of the Gambelia johnsea, and it's just again, it's kind of taken over, but we love it. And And I think, are we going to go down? Yeah. Okay, we're going to go down here to our next water.
We can try it. Your
Our next water feature.
video and audio have been cutting out a little bit, so I'm a little nervous. We might want to not go too far.
Can you hear us right now?
We can hear you right now.
Okay.
We can. Okay, we can stay here.
Okay, you're cutting in and out a little bit.
So this is another one of
better.
the water features in the garden, and this one actually has frogs in it, and the frogs found their way here on their own. They came here from a creek that's down below the property. And it's just, if people ask what's a great thing to put in to help wildlife, water is a great thing to help wildlife. And all of these water features are ecosystems that are alive and flourishing. And again, feeding animals with the animals that are actually breeding in these water features.
That's great. One of the uniting themes as we're kind of nearing the end of the segment for all three of our guests is talking about this transition that we're all experiencing from spring to summer. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the maintenance regimes that you do and don't do this time of year in order to protect, what's
well, one thing for sure is that pruning stops in the garden during bird breeding season. There's no pruning going on now, and there really shouldn't into the early summer. That's one main thing. And on that note, I'd also say that because everyone does prune their gardens so well, you're removing habitat for some secondary cavity nesting birds, and Susan has replaced that habitat by putting out birdhouses. So this transition right now is kind of trying to stay out of the garden, stay out of the way of the animals. Once we get into summer, it's going to shift from the birds into more bees and wasps. They're a little less disrupted by human activity. And then, of course, in the fall, that's a good time to prune your garden because that's a slow time for animals.
That's excellent. And Susan, any final tips on appreciating the messier look or the less manicured look of a native landscape as it's going into summer dormancy?
I'm sorry. Would you repeat that question, please?
Will you just share with us what you appreciate about a native landscape as it's going into its summer season and perhaps it's not looking as manicured or tidy?
Well, I love the brown pods and the seed pods, and just that it's moving into its life cycle, and the birds are just enjoying the seeds and just it's nature. It's just part of nature, and even though it's a little messy at times, I think it's all part of the story.
Thank you both.
I just wanted to point out this ironwood we've got right behind. We have a construction site.
You're cutting out. Your audio's cutting out. I think we're going to say thank you so much for joining us.
So there's, I think,
you're back in. All right, Susan and Scott, we're going to say goodbye. We're getting a lot of audio and video breaks. Not sure if you can hear me, but thank you both so much. And I think I'm going to kick it over to Evan here to talk about our next guest.
Yes. Thank you, Susan and Scott. Absolutely amazing garden and just a wonderful, vibrant landscape of life. And of course, those native plants are providing a lot of food for animals. We're going to talk now about native plants providing food for another kind of animal, the type of animal that holds Zoom calls, the human animal. And so we're going to talk with one of the main contributors, major contributors to this book. Again, it's Cooking the Native Way. Absolutely amazing book. I was flipping through it earlier today, and I hadn't, it's getting to be 6, so it was making me really hungry looking at the photos. I want to introduce Abe Sanchez, who is actively involved in the preservation of Indigenous arts and foods And he has specialties in Southern California, American Indian basket weaving, and native foods. So, hi, Abe. You're on mute, so we'll click the mute button there. There we go. We can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yes, welcome.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, Abe, people may have heard the name Chia Café, and if you haven't, you'll learn about it now. It's really an amazing thing. What is the Chia Café?
Well, interesting. Listen to other people who develop books. It's a collective of about 10 of us interested in native foods, native culture, Southern California native culture, and all of us just bringing something together. And whereas we have Barbara and Craig, for example, who are more into the culture bearers. We have anthropologists. So Deborah Small, who was one who designed the book, along with Tina Link. So it was just this beautiful collection of people all together that ended up, our plan originally was not to even develop a cookbook, but it just came about what we came about. And we all started saying, hey, well, we own these recipes and all of us have these talents. So we just came about with this book. All of us are native and non-native people in the group, encouraging others to do the same as we did. So yeah, it's and kind of history after that. So working a lot with the tribal people in Southern California on the revitalization of indigenous foods, as well as anybody interested in it as well.
Yeah, and I through my friend Antonio Sanchez, who I don't think is related to you, but he brought me into the fold a few times, and I got to enjoy some of the meals you guys make, and it's just amazing the flavors that are so unknown in our California flora. So before we get into the recipes, because I know people are going to want to know what are the best foods to eat, what best plant foods, I want to talk a little bit just about how you think about foraging and some of the ethics there, and how you approach that when you're teaching about native plant foods.
Yeah, good point. The concern there is us being such a developed area. The concern is, of course, over harvesting some of these plants in its natural elements, in the wild, if you want to call it, in nature. And it was interesting because we were talking with people in Arizona, and they, again, too, there's a big movement there with native foods, and they weren't as concerned as we are. But again, here, because we have so much larger population, and of course, development stuff is something that we're concerned about. One of the things that we've kind of changed instead of wild gathering, we've also encouraged people to grow their own native plants at home. Many of these plants, for those of you who don't have a yard, could also be planted in pots, for example, which do well. Obviously, things like an oak tree, you're not going to be able to do something like that, but many of these foods that you showed, the black sage, that does real well in a pot. You can grow that. So other than if you have the property to grow that. So that was our concern there, was just the over harvesting of some of these plants today would be an issue there. But yeah, it's would be, like I said, encouraging people to growing them at home.
Grow your own. I like that.
Grow your own, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, you could definitely imagine that being an issue. I think of something like wild onions that tend to not be, not always super prolific. And if you take the whole plant to harvest that, you're taking the whole bulb. That could be very, very destructive. So grow your own. It can be done, and many plants, you can get them here at TPF.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that we should just caution people to be sensitive to that, and there are permits and things like that if you are going to be foraging. But the California flora is so aromatic, and there's all these plants that you just walk around and you get these amazing smells, like this black sage. So we'll talk about maybe some of those aromatic plants a little bit later. But I want to start with what you would consider the staple foods, the things that you go back to most commonly in your cooking.
Well, I would say today, probably one of my favorite, and one of the things that I really want to take this opportunity to promote again is honey mesquite. This is in the legume family. The botanical name is Prosopis glandulosa. It's a native to the Southwest, starts here, its territory starts in Arizona, moves all the way into Texas, all the way down south into Mexico. Again, this food, this bean here, sustained native people for thousands and thousands of years of people have eaten this food. It's considered, I'm going to call it a superfood. Needless to say, people are not eating it today. And we also like to press the importance about sustainable food sources. This is a plant, a tree that grows in the Sonoran deserts or in the deserts where it might be. And again, it doesn't need to be watered. It's watered by the monsoons. It tends by itself. So again, high in nutrients, mucilaginous. I don't know if you've heard of the benefits of eating cactus, nopal. This is the same elements for that same nutritional value there as well. It neutralizes people's blood sugar, keeps you full, so it's good for diabetics. And again, you can drive for hours and hours to the Sonoran Desert of mesquite trees, and this is something, again, that we don't utilize. Most people, when you talk about mesquite, they understand, they believe, they know right away, they understand the mesquite barbecue, right? Because what they do is they cut the tree down to make charcoal, and then they barbecue your meat with that charcoal. So needless to say that, you know, they kill the tree. So, but then again, this, like I said, is one of my favorite food sources here. That again, from my people that I've learned from, this is a food that can save the world of hunger, again, because of where it grows. I do have some, in our book, we have a little segment on it, recipes on how to cook. I did have some right here that I made. I made some of the crackers. We have the recipe in there with mesquite flour. But, you know, some of the things that we kind of run into, which is I want to cover too, is in the reintroduction of some of these native foods, is that we've had a lot of barriers in this, is that getting people to learn and adapt to these new flavors. It is the benefit that mesquite has, it is a sweet molasses sort of kind of flavor food. So it's more readily accepted by people, where other things like chia, for example, if you eat it in natural sense, it's not going to be sweet. You have to kind of, chia, as you know, as you roast it, it's going to give you a better flavor than eating it just plain raw. So this is one food that we have found that has been very easy to introduce. Not only can you use it for baking, again, it is a gluten-free product, but again, not only for baking, you can use it, we put it in our tortillas as an additive. I like to bread my chicken or fish with it instead of white flour. It does char a little bit more, so you have to be a little more careful than flour. Traditionally, it was roasted and ground into these big cottonwood kind of mortars, where it was ground into a flour, and then traditionally was eating as a gruel. Well, we found it at the beginning when we were kind of do this, we're getting people to try to eat these things traditionally, like in a gruel. Well, we find out most Americans don't want to eat these gruels anymore. So it's kind of, so this is when we started to kind of mix these foods. I'm going to say, you know, when we started making other recipes with it, we started making tortillas with it, putting in our baking stuff, whatever, as a slow kind of reintroduction for people to kind of develop a palate for these foods. But then again, this was, so again, with the mesquite, definitely something important.
I love that idea of combining the old and the new, and utilizing these ancient flavors in ways that people are more accustomed to. I really want to ask real quick, because you showed the beautiful beans of the mesquite. What time of year would you harvest those typically?
The season right now, it's in its bloom. So probably late summer, September, October, September. Now, one thing that you need to know about mesquite, probably the only negative thing about it, is that it can be, if you gather the bean before it hits the ground, is what's recommended. Also, too, is it because the same nut allergy that people can have, like for peanuts, is probably the only thing that you want to be concerned about. But they do know that if you catch it before it hits the ground, you're less chance it's going to. But remember, it's like any legume. If your beans, you can be allergic to beans, peanuts, whatever. That would probably be the only disadvantage, which is a common. So it's not an unusual, you know, negative to it. But yeah, and the interesting thing about mesquite too is that different trees are some can be sweeter than others. The mesquite that we use here is from a co-op from the Seri Indians in Sonora, Mexico, and they know to go back to that same tree every year because they know that this tree is sweeter than the one down the road. So again, these trees do have different personalities. Needless to say, if you plant a tree, I mean, it just doesn't know. You're not going to know which one, what it's going to be. But that in the gathering in the field, I mean, that is something that you want to do. What I do usually, I'm out there gathering in the forest, in the deserts, wherever. I like to taste one. I like to grab one and taste it, see which one seems sweeter to me, and of course, then I'm going to get that one from that tree.
And so, are you eating just the beans or the whole pod? How do you process it?
What you do, okay, traditionally, what you do is this mesquite was roasted, lightly roasted. And let me talk about if you want to do it at home. If you want to gather your beans, dry them out. I have them in a gunny sack, and I'm letting them dry for a few months. You put them in an oven, like in a cookie tray, and you roast them for maybe 20 minutes. You don't want to char them, you want to burn them, because if you char it, it's going to go bitter. Okay, so it's very careful that you watch it. Now, right now, as you notice, it doesn't quite, I mean, it kind of bends because it's not roasted. So when you roast it and you know it's done, it's going to snap just like that. That means it's been roasted, it's done. And that's going to give an example there. Once you do that, then you get a good blender. I mean, any blenders work. Of course, these Vitamix are, they're expensive, but people can, do have those. But I have just a regular blender. And you blend as much as you can. It's pretty much just the outside that gets blended. The bean, then you sift it, and the bean, if you can grind the seed with a lot of nutrients are, I mean, that's good for you. Good if you can do that. But many times you just get the outer layer of the bean. So that would be way on how you process this food. There's another species too. It's this one. It's the screw bean. This one is not as flavored. It was eaten as well. Much more attractive, I think, more attractive kind of looking bean too. Nice. It's a pretty looking little guy.
Yeah.
But not as flavorful. And one of the things that I do want to bring the attention to is that some of you are going to be interested in wanting to hopefully try some of these new recipes, try this mesquite bean. Needless to say, there's not a big demand for it. There's not a lot. It's kind of hard to find. In our book, we do have resources where you can get it. One, for example, would be the Native Seed Search in Tucson, as well as the Tohono O'odham Co-op outside of Tucson as well. It's a Native community there that do get the kids out there to go gather the beans and bring it back and roast it, and they do sell it. You can also buy it online there, depending on how they have it. Our goal is hopefully people get to develop a flavor for it and need for this, and hopefully we'll have a demand for it where people will start marketing this stuff. It'll be much more available, because the one that you're going to find today, you can find a variety, but you're going to find a species coming in from South America. That's the one you're going to find more likely on market today. I myself personally am not too fond of it. I really don't like the flavor. It's a little too tart for me. The honey mesquite, this Prosopis glandulosa, I think is the best one. It just has a better flavor to it. And it is the traditional one from here on our land in the Americas, in North America, should I say. And again, we're not utilizing this food source. I mean, it's a shame that we're not utilizing it.
Yeah, I think the only time I ever tried it was with you at your house with Antonio, and it does have this very delicious molasses flavor. I could imagine it being used in many ways. So what are some of the other things that you're working on right now that you're really excited about?
Okay, another fun one that we just discovered, another sustainable food source is the California fan palm, the Washingtonian filifera, would be the botanical name. This was kind of funny. We had heard about that this was edible. The Cahuilla were a community Native American out of Palm Springs, that area, that would gather this. That's pretty much, it comes in from Baja and kind of pretty much that's its growth territory. But then another food source that grows in the desert, doesn't need to be watered. They do like the little, waters of springs where they live at, where they're at, but it can be pretty much grown anywhere. This is delicious, makes a delicious sherbet. Same nutrition. We're trying to get the nutritional value, but it's similar to the date it's in a date family. So Deborah Small and I were up in Anza Borrego a couple years ago, and one of the gardeners there at the private residence was cutting down the fruit. And long and behold, we walked up and we said, "Hey, can we have that?" He was on the way to the dump with it, and he said, "Can we have it?" No, we'll take it. So we went and got some bags and picked it up, and then just started playing with it. I boil it down. I made some syrup. You can make syrup very easy. You maybe get like a pound of these berries off and boil it down, then strain it. You can make a nice sweet syrup, kind of date tasting. I used it to sweeten things such as this gingerbread recipe made with mesquite. So this gingerbread recipe calls for molasses. So instead of molasses, I used Washingtonian Filifera syrup. Again, how to, where to gather it. It's usually ready in the fall. Some of the concerns that we have, people were asking, well, migratory birds might eat this. They do. But what they're doing now at the desert right now, it's a plant that even though Palm Springs has this all over the place, the residents don't really like it because it's a very messy plant. It drops, stains the driveway and so forth, whatever. So really, so far, we have had no problem in asking permission and asking people that we can gather this stuff because they're really willing to get rid of it. We're trying to reintroduce it back into people, make a market for it. Not a market, or just an interest for it. And again, one of these, again, good, natural sweetener, again, grows in the desert, doesn't need to be watered. It'll stay on the plant for a number of months. God, I think we picked it. It'll start seeding. It's flowering now, and it'll probably be turning into fruit by the summer, and it'll stay until maybe January, February. That's amazing. That the raccoons and rodents and foxes were eating it, as well as the ravens were eating it. One place that I found out.
So for all the city dwellers who are listening in right now, which is most of us, I think, in LA, the Mexican fan palm, Washingtonia robusta, Abe is talking about the California fan palm, Washingtonia foliifera. There's actually a paper that just came out that combined lumped those two species together. So the street tree that you see all over the city, they call them berry dusters. They're the super tall palm trees that have that spindly trunk and the little tiny tuft of leaves. They also produce a very similar fruit, and I'm sure you could make the exact same syrup with that.
And that's the thing. Like for us, it's a lot of been just trial and error, getting people to want to experiment this. Another barrier that we ran into was people being afraid to try some of these foods from the wild, if you call it. The big concern of being poisoned. We encourage people to, of course, there's a lot of apps out there that you can take a picture of it, send it. People can, it's pretty easy to find out. The things that we at least have our book that we have are things that, of course, are documented and so forth, edible. Also the seed, actually, this was also parched. And the seed has a high nutritional value as well. So you parch it, and then what the native people would do all over from here, all over to the south. Remember, when it came in from Baja, there was also parched and ground into a flour as well. So the seed pod is also eaten as well as the fruit from this. So again, another sustainable food source that we highly encourage people to. These are foods that the route that we've kind of taken is these foods of the future. And as our population grows and our land, is over farmed, we have all this desert land, and we have these foods out there that we're not really kind of taking a look at. And this is an example. The mesquite and palm syrup are two things that I kind of like to think introduce people to.
I think that's such a wonderful thought, that there are hidden foods that can be delicious and healthy and reduce our consumption of resources at the same time. So we're kind of coming to the end here. There's a lot of plants in your book that I would highly recommend people get a copy and dive deep. We just barely scratched the surface. But as we wrap up, Abe, I want to ask, what is, doing this, connecting with your local wild landscape in this way, where you're actually bringing it into your body and eating it, what does that mean to you? And is that, what would you tell someone who's just learning about how you can forge a new connection to nature through doing this?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, it's just, I think the excitement for us plant lovers to go out there instead of enjoying just our beautiful flowers, which I love to do. But then again, when you know that there's something there and it's edible, it's good for you, it's healthy. Like I said, speaking of mesquite, I mean, it's the superfood. But I think that relationship connection that many of us have lost with plants. I'm sure our community here, our pretty people, I know listening here are probably people connected with plants. But I think in general, I think just developing this relationship and continuing to teach others to develop this relationship with plants and the importance on how they keep us alive, and again needing us to continue to learn on what's out there right under our nose that is edible here on our land, and we may not be taking advantage of it. So
yes, thank you so much for joining us, Abe, and please stick around for our final segment. We have one final guest to close out our season of Poppy Hour. Margaret, can you introduce our wonderful guest?
Yeah, so I'm thrilled that Casey Schreiner, who's the founder of Modernhiker, which is a website that I will bet many of our Poppy Hour viewers and community members have utilized. Casey is here with us, and he, as Evan pointed out, just came out with a new book, Discovering Griffith Park, which I heard was sold out in a lot of places, although we still have some at Theodore Payne. So yeah, welcome, Casey. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I was wondering if you could start by telling us how you're doing. And you actually were watching Poppy Hour, and you have a strong connection to native plants yourself. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about that.
Yes. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Susan and Abe. I love Susan's book, and her garden's amazing. And Abe's book is on my shelf as well. This is all really, really good programming you guys have here. So for me, I'm a hiker primarily. I sort of came into the land of California 17 years ago from New England, and was really connected to or fascinated by native plants from what I saw on the trails. Literally just like walking around the San Gabriels or the Santa Monicas, and kind of, especially in springtime, sniffing around and saying, what plant makes everything smell really nice and is giving me all this energy? And through time, I actually came and took some classes at the Theodore Payne Foundation to sort of learn about what these plants were, what their names were, what grew next to each other and made each other happy, and actually form my own very small native plant garden here in Hollywood. It's not nearly as nice as Susan's, but it's pretty cool. Basically, during the drought a couple years ago, my landlord kind of let me rip up all the dead rose bushes, and I planted black sages and buckwheats, and there's a fairy duster in the back, and everything as we've talked about earlier today, just kind of become a wildlife magnet for my yard. I actually had a red-shouldered hawk sitting in a tree above me while I was gardening last season, and that was a pretty magical experience for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, we'll have to talk later about perhaps featuring you on some future version of a garden tour that we hold. I know that yesterday you shared with us that you have some really cool native plant tattoos. So yes. I was wondering if you would be willing to show our viewers what you've gotten so far.
Yes, of course. I'd be happy to share. So the first tattoo that I got is a California sagebrush, which is right here.
Which we saw in Susan's garden.
Susan's garden. And then this was the new addition. This is a Toyin, which is the official LA City native plant. So I got this when I finished my book on Griffith Park, just because it's kind of a very LA book. And then on this arm, not really native to the LA area, but that's an ocotillo, which is more down the Anza Borrego area, one of my favorite desert plants as well. And now, unfortunately, tattoo parlors are still closed, but I know what I'm getting next. I am actually getting a kind of a sage leaf collection. I'm doing black sage, white sage, and hummingbird sage leaves all together.
Really cool. That's super fun. So I know I've been following your Instagram, and I know you've been out on trails, and you've been a really helpful voice in this very tricky time of all of us being so happy to have access to trails again and getting outside and connecting with nature, but then the etiquette, the mask situation, hiking in a pandemic, it's all a bit confusing, to say the least. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you've been seeing, what kind of tips you've been giving people, just the best practices for hiking in the era of COVID.
Yeah, hiking in the era of COVID is really weird. It really depends on kind of which park you're going to, who's in charge of that park. Rules are different in a place like Griffith Park than they are out in the Santa Monica Mountains or in the Verdugos or in the San Gabriels. But generally, people are being told to cover their mouths at least when you're passing someone, especially on narrow single track trails. It can be tough to really keep that social distancing. I'm telling folks to sort of stick to the wider fire road trails if they're concerned. So Griffith Park has 70 miles of trails, equestrian and hiking trails. There's really, really good fire road networks in the Santa Monica Mountains, up in the Santa Susana Mountains as well. The Puente Hills have great trails. There's some good fire road trails in the San Gabriels as well. Or if you do want to try to avoid crowds, get up super, super early, way earlier than you think you need to, or go kind of deep into the San Gabriels, go somewhere where you don't necessarily see people that often. And if you've seen a hike on like a top 10 list, you should probably avoid that hike right now.
Yeah, those are good tips. Sunrise hikes are the way to go these days. And there is a little bit of a, I think for people who aren't going into work right now, and so many people have been laid off, people are getting into hiking that maybe weren't hiking so much before. And I think yesterday when we were having a conversation, we touched on this a little bit. And a few episodes ago, we were talking about kind of the broad issue of environmental equity. But just, I think for people that hike really often, it might be frustrating that all these newbies are out on the trail, but at the same time, there's some really positive aspects to that as well. I was wondering if you could speak from your perspective.
Yes, there is definitely a little bit of an element of like when you knew a band before they were cool, and then like all the normal people found out about them with hiking right now. But at the end of the day, it's a really good thing. More people getting out into nature means more people can be exposed to being awestruck by nature. Like I did not grow up as an outdoorsy person. I was an indoor kid growing up and really did not discover the outdoors until I moved out to Los Angeles and found myself kind of going crazy in the city. And I looked around and saw that there were mountain ranges here with hiking trails and was really stunned by what I saw. So I feel like, especially right now, there's a lot of people who are kind of discovering our trail systems for the very first time. And they may not know necessarily what good hiking etiquette is, what you should and shouldn't do on the trail. So I think it sort of behooves us sort of more veteran outdoorsy people to take this as a learning opportunity or a teaching opportunity to really kind of model some good behavior along the way. I always hike with a trash bag with me just so I can pick up some litter along the way.
Love that.
I'm almost always wearing my mask unless I'm in a place where I can kind of bring it down if there's no one around. And just really taking the time to answer questions for people, or if they look lost, or if they're, I actually love when someone's admiring a plant. If someone's rubbing up against a sagebrush and they're like really enjoying it, I ask them if they know what that plant is and give them an opportunity to let them know how cool that plant is and how it grows everywhere and how most of the time of the year it kind of looks like a boring gray shrub that looks totally uninteresting, but it's actually a foundational plant for a lot of the communities out here. And hopefully that can kind of, wake up some people's eyes a little bit to some of the beauty that's really right in front of our faces here.
That's amazing. I know Evan also has some questions for you as well. So I think my final question that I wanted you to talk about, since I kind of consider you this, this voice of hiking expertise, such a positive, spirit in the world of hiking. Can you tell us about harvesting native plants on trails? Because I think sometimes, just to follow up on what you're saying, people are so excited to be, learning about these plants and experiencing these plants. What is the etiquette around harvesting?
So as Abe was saying earlier, the etiquette around harvesting generally is don't do it. We do have a really big population center here. And a lot of the trails, especially that are close to the city, can be pretty crowded and overused. So maybe one person going and picking a couple leaves off of a black sage isn't going to cause that much damage, but multiply that by the 5,000 or 6,000 people that are doing that trail over a year, and you can get some hillsides that become pretty denuded and really picked over. There are a lot of ways to enjoy the native plants out here without destroying them. Just rubbing a black sage leaf, rubbing California sagebrush, enjoying the view of California poppies without, lying down in them to take a picture for Instagram. These are all ways that you can sort of enjoy what's out there without kind of destroying it for other people. And if you do want to harvest and you do want to use them for your own stuff, again, as Abe was saying, tons of stuff grows in containers and we'll be very happy. And if you are lucky enough to have a tiny little sliver of land or a friendly landlord that will let you put some stuff in the ground, the native plants out here, if you get the right plant in the right spot, they'll be really, really happy and very easy to grow.
Very easy to grow. So yes, many of them are. So Casey, I'm also a New Englander. Actually, we didn't talk about this, but I'm from Massachusetts. Yeah.
I'm from Connecticut.
Okay. Yeah. So when I first moved out here and with my New Englander hiking, my heavy pants and my flannel, and it was the middle of January, and I think I was down in Laguna Hills, and everybody's got their Speedo hiking gear on, and I was like, whoa, this is a different place.
Yes. And
since then I've gotten totally used to hiking in, I do Inspiration Point in August, and not a big deal. I love the heat, but we are heading into the hot time of year. And I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing, it's kind of weird to share these places and blow them up during this COVID time, but not too many people will see this. What are some really good off the beaten track summer hiking spots?
So generally with summer hiking stuff, I kind of give some basic ground rules for folks, in addition to just the regular safety rules of bringing more water than you think you need, bringing food, having a map and knowing how to read it, telling people where you're going. I generally tell people to look for water, shade, and elevation. So water is good, whether you're hugging the Pacific coast, especially like right now when we have our marine layer, the June gloom that's rolling in. If you go in the morning, it's going to be pretty chilly out there. And you can time like a really tough incline hike, like Nicholas Flat over at Leo Carrillo State Park. It's a steep
incline
on the way up. So enjoy the shade and cool from the marine layer on your way up. And then you get to enjoy the sun and summer on your way down. That can also just be like a canyon stream, something like Big Santa Anita Canyon has really nice shade and has water year round. Generally not going to be the most uncrowded of trails. That one's pretty popular. Or go elevation. So as it gets warmer, go up in elevation, go to the San Gabriels, where their spring is kind of just starting right now. So a lot of the flowers down here are kind of on their, I won't say their last legs, but they're sort of becoming that summer brown that we have in California, whereas the higher elevations, they're just starting to sprout. Although I will say that I was in Griffith Park today and saw tons of California buckwheat that was blooming, as well as some brittle bush. It looked really, really lovely up there. So you can still find really good stuff even here in the lower elevations. Totally.
And that's actually a good reminder to me that this is the last week of our wildflower hotline, which just went out today. We do it, for a certain chunk of time in the spring, but there are wildflowers all year round. And as you go up in elevation, you can find them. I know that I went hiking last weekend in the Santa Monica Mountains around Dirt Mulholland, and the Clarkia, which are called Farewell to Spring, which always makes me, it's kind of a bittersweet thing to see the Clarkias, the farewell to springs, because that spring is ending. But yeah, that's great advice, just to get high and get some shade.
Yes. Yeah. And again, just speaking as a New Englander, like we're kind of used to like leaf season in New England, like you basically have 2 weeks and that's it. And if you miss it, you've missed it. And one of the things the wildflower hotline was so useful for me to learn when I moved out here was it really is, there's always something blooming here. You just need to know where to go and what elevation to go at, but there's always something to see here.
Yeah, and then it kind of extends your hiking experience because you can kind of track that throughout the week, and you're planning your Saturday morning hike, and you're kind of getting to check into things a little more and get more of a connection to the landscape. So I know that you speak for hikers broadly, and I've I'm a botanist. A lot of my friends are botanists and horticulturists. So when we hike, it's pretty slow. You know, the joke about botanists is they take a hike and they never leave the parking lot. They just they look at plants in the parking lot. And when I hike with friends of mine who aren't in the plant world, I'm always shocked by how they just are right up the mountain. You know, peak baggers. What would you tell, you know, maybe one of your fans who's tuning in tonight who is a peak bagger, has never stopped to look at the plants? Why look at the plants? What's interesting about doing what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think you know, I listen. I think a lot of hikers kind of start off as peak baggers, or you know, list completists, or maybe you're just a fitness oriented hiker and you're trying to like burn the most calories to get up there. I feel like as you kind of spend more time out on the trail, you will find the thing that is really calling you to be out there, whether it's geology, whether it's history, whether it's botany. For me, really noticing the native plants has totally changed the way that I approach a hiking trail. Now I am a very slow hiker because I'm always stopping to take pictures for iNaturalist, or just anyone who's ever hiked with me on a group hike knows that I will not shut up about the plants that we're passing on the trail. And I'm hoping that you know, some people will get excited by these things. Even just pointing out Toyin in Griffith Park, people don't know that it's, you know, connected to the story of how Hollywood got its name, or that it is the city plant of LA, and it happens to be a native plant, or it's I think it's the only California native plant that maintains its original indigenous name as well. So there's really, really cool stories behind some of these plants. And for me, it's just like, it's another layer of enjoyment to be outside. It's always great to get hiking, get physically active, enjoy being in the outdoors. But if you can add another layer, whether it's learning some weird story, or you know, seeing a fault line near the tunnel, near the observatory in Griffith Park, and understanding the geology of the area, or just kind of learning about how the different plants work with each other out here in different plant communities. That to me is like, that's like choice hiking time spent outside, I think.
Totally. I love that adding layers. I always think about that from my perspective as a plant person, you know, going around the city and seeing different plant species and having an idea of where they come from and what botanical family they're in, and how they're related to one another. It's what I imagine being like a hardcore car buff is like, when you're like going around and getting excited by cars. It's the same thing with plants. And I love that you brought in history, because that, you know, that I think you'll find it in this book, some history. In a place like Griffith Park, so much history. I just want you to maybe paint the picture real quick. I just happened to be there today taking a tour of something that's not open to the public, but it's just a cool place. There's a great article about it, which is the Commonwealth Nursery in Griffith Park. Can you just kind of tell our viewers what that is?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So the Commonwealth Nursery, as you mentioned, it's not open to the public, so you can't go in and just kind of walk around. But it's located kind of to the east of the Roosevelt Golf Course. It's up Commonwealth Avenue before it stops right before the park there. And it was built in actually 1929. It was a Depression era building, and it was built because originally there were a lot of plans for Griffith Park to be basically flooded with a bunch of exotic plants. The thinking at that time was that chaparral and sage scrub was really flammable, and it was dangerous to people who were living in the neighborhoods below it. And the way that you would solve that problem is by planting a bunch of pine trees, a bunch of eucalyptus, and things that weren't native and didn't really belong there. So the nursery unfortunately fell into disrepair for many, many years. It was used as this sort of like storage ground just for rec and parks equipment and stuff like that. But recently, over the past few years, it's been taken over and revitalized by a bunch of different organizations. Grown in LA is the one that's sort of like in charge of revitalizing. And now they're using those same historic 1929 buildings to actually start growing California native plants. And they're doing this so that they can use them throughout Griffith Park, so that they can start revitalizing the LA River, and that they can teach other parks and other places around Southern California how to do their own native plant nurseries and do that as well. And if you go down there, it's great because they actually have plants that were collected from seeds in Griffith Park. So this is super hyper local native plants. I actually met some of the people who were working that nursery while I was writing the book. And they were very kind enough to give me a little California buckwheat that was collected from a seed that was in Griffith Park. And now I have it growing in my garden. So I have a little piece of Griffith Park growing in my garden here in Hollywood.
Yeah, and a lot of those plants were grown by Catherine Packarduni, who teaches many of our courses here at TPF.
Yes.
Is actually working for us right now and has in the past. And she's a great horticulturist and a great person. And she wrote the article, which I think Philip has linked in our Zoom chat. So Casey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going a little over, and I want to give time for everyone to end this show as we always do. The final show of the first season of Poppy Hour. We take a question and we kind of go around roundtable style and give our answer to that question. And because it's the season finale and we're ending the season, I wanted to pick a question that is very broad and can kind of wrap up all these ideas that we've explored over the past 8 weeks, and take it from whatever angle you see is most appropriate. But the question is a very simple one, which is, what do native plants mean to you? So let's see, maybe Abe, would you want to take a first crack at that? You're on mute. Oh, let me click you're on mute. Okay, you're good. Oh.
Yeah. Boy. Well, it's the beauty of California. And actually, for those New Englanders, I might have mentioned that we call the dry time the golden stage of California. Okay. So it's our golden stage. But I think it's just us developing a relationship with these plants, and really, this is part of the land structure, land here, and and many of them are edible. And I think just in like I was saying earlier, it's just that some of these things, we bring foods from all over the world and to supplement our eating, but there's a lot of things here, and again, but of course, with care and growing and maybe farming some of these things for the future are things that we may want to consider as future foods of California. I know other states, Arizona is really on top of that. I think California, we need to hop on board and kind of start looking into that as well. But yeah, I think
a new angle for appreciating our native plants. So I want to move through our panelists tonight. Maybe Scott and Susan, do you guys want to take a stab at that question? What do native plants mean to you?
They mean the future to me. I think that as a food source for not just us, but our wildlife, and a renewal of California. That may be a bit overstated, but
no.
For me, it's very simple. It's wildlife diversity. And it could be in the middle of any city and you get wildlife diversity. And I find that to be a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I agree with that. Casey, what do native plants mean to you?
Yeah, those are all really terrific answers. For me, native plants are a sense of place and a sense of community. I feel like, especially people who come to a big city like LA, or if you move anywhere else in the country and you're trying to find your roots, your community, if you can look around and see what your plant communities are and really start paying attention, then this sort of like generic shrubbery chaparral background becomes a vibrant, alive place that's very specific to a specific region. And that to me has really given me a great anchor and a sense of place, and just it's really helped me find myself here in Southern California.
Thank you. As a fellow New Englander, I can relate to that. Philip, what do native plants mean to you?
Hey, Evan. Yeah, so I was recently reading science fiction author and art critic Bruce Sterling, and he writes in his book, Shaping Things, while we have the good fortune to be living, we should invent and imply ways of life that expand the options of our descendants, rather than causing irreparable damage to their heritage. And I really think that to protect, nurture, and cultivate native plants is to expand those options of our descendants, which is clearly more important than ever.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. So Margaret, what do native plants mean to you?
Yeah, so I guess I feel like all the guests have given really thoughtful answers that really resonate with me. I think I've sort of deep dived and worked in the realm of native plant horticulture and design and education for about a decade now. And so now wherever I go, whenever I find native plants, it actually makes me feel really safe and at home. And I'm a total sage eater. So like I'm in grad school at UC Irvine, and back when we were on campus, there's a little native garden on that campus that the minute I found it, I felt so much better about graduate school. And it was like a refuge that I would go to and munch on the Clevelandia leaves and flower buds, which is so mean, but they're delicious. So I forage from garden sites that are, not wild, but it helps me. It helps me feel good. Like just having in the urban neighborhood where I live, there are a few people that have some sage plants. I have a very picked over purple sage, Salvia leucophylla, and it makes me feel like there's some foundation of the ecosystem going on here. It's very grounding and kind of like a stabilizing feeling that I get from native plants.
Yeah.
How about you, Evan?
All right, I'll close out the season with my answer, which is that to me, native plants are hope that we can take a different path in the way that we interact with our planet. And I see something like this. It is a potted plant. So this is a commercial product that represents the essence of where we are. And to be able to make that choice of recreating nature in our cities is a really hopeful thing. That I think if anything comes of this horrible pandemic that we've been in, the sense of hope that many people are feeling, and the sense of possibility of doing things slightly differently, and maybe making our lives more harmonious with the places that we live, and making homes for a wide range of life, not just human life, but all kinds of life within our cities. So they mean hope to me, and I feel hopeful right now. When we started this show 8 weeks ago, we didn't know where we'd be. I think we still don't really know where we are in the pandemic, but I feel a lot of hope, and the fact that we've had people tuning in each week and making great comments and interacting with us makes me even more hopeful. So thank you guys so much for joining. I think we should bring up our final puppy hour, Margaret, which is the social portion. We'll start to bring all of our friends up on screen here.
All right, let's bring up friends for our Zoom social moment, the last few minutes. And Evan, I really want to thank you for, it was your idea to kind of take what we created for the online garden tour and create this weekly show. And I think it's been a really wonderful experiment. And I also just want to thank you for all your hard work as executive director, steering the ship at Theodore Payne during this really, really intense time. You've been doing a great job, and I know all the staff is really, really appreciative. I'm promoting people to panelists as I'm talking, so.
Does anybody else want to try to answer that question? People who are joining, what do native plants mean to them?
Well, I would want to say that I've loved having all the birds. You can hear the birds in the background and the butterflies. I'm learning more about the bees that come back here right now, and so I've loved having all that stuff in my backyard.
You can hear them. You should unmute, actually. Leave that background noise for us.
I think for us, it means life too. Our neighbors the other day were just saying to us, we talk over the fence. And he goes, "Oh yeah, we saw some monarchs flying. We figured they were from your garden." And I thought, yeah, they must have been, because we have a lot of life back here now, so much. And we just observe them in their, whatever it is they're doing and nesting and foraging, and it's really lovely.
Evan, hi, this is Yvette from Metropolitan Water District. To me, of course, it's beauty, it's the connection to nature, but because I think in acre feet, it means using water wisely. And, it really has been a pleasure to tune in with the Theodore Payne and all the great friends that we've made over the last 8 weeks, and to talk about using water wisely, talk about our conservation and education programs. So we're very thankful for the opportunity, and it's been great to see the success of the Poppy Hour. And in the process, a very nice escape given this unique world that we're in right now, to be able to carve some special time on a Friday afternoon to really enjoy these beautiful gardens and nature and hear the birds. And it really has been a very special escape. So thank you very much. And hello to all my friends.
Thanks, Yvette.
Thanks, Yvette.
Thanks, Yvette.
Thank
Sponsoring. And thanks. Yeah, we had such a fun episode last week talking about water. That was really, really cool.
Yeah.
All right, who's going to jump in next?
I think what I've found, especially with Poppy Hour, native plants mean community, and for me, not just community with other people, but community with wildlife, and actually community with the universe, because we're all made of the same stardust. We have that element of stardust in all of us, in plants and animals, humans. We're all a part of this, and that's what it means to me, native plants.
Thanks, Tuchis. Thanks for joining us. I think you've been around for most of our episodes.
Yes, except only one, but yeah, I've been around. I love it. It's been my joy every week.
I love that answer too. I mean, I've been on this kind of astronomy nerd kick recently, and so I'm thinking about stars and planets all the time, and it's been a good distraction for me. But I love linking, our biodiversity with the universe. So thank you for that. That was I really like that. I see a lot of faces there who probably have an answer to this. Who's going to jump up next?
Hello, I will. You know what? I like a few of you on the call. I'm from the East Coast too, so it took me a couple of years probably to appreciate California's native plants, and now I can't imagine not appreciating them. And it, one, it sort of feels grounding and appropriate, but it feels like the right thing to do. I feel sort of like no guilt putting a native plant in the ground versus something that's maybe more water intensive or isn't quite appropriate. So it feels sort of easy and like the right decision, and it just sort of makes it feel like it's California. And it's like when I'm used to work in Palm Springs and I'm like, all these people, I love the desert. I'm like, but you have a yard full of grass. Like I don't, like, you love the desert, but then you're changing it. So like that doesn't sort of make sense to me. So I feel like if you love an area, you should do things to preserve it and not make it look like something else.
Totally. That's really funny. Love the desert. I paved it over and put grass, and yeah.
Exactly. Oh, look at that golf course. There's 18 holes of grass. Well, that's not the desert. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
You just like being in very hot weather in that case.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, I still see a lot of people who haven't.
I'll jump in. Hey guys.
Hi, Frank.
Really quick, I just want to thank Margaret and Philip and Evan and Tim and like everybody who's just given their time. Like, this has been an amazing evolution of the garden tour, and I really cherish sort of the budding friendships that we have. To me, sort of thinking about it through the lens of the tour and recreating a yard of the stylized version of nature. To me, it's very much like it's a political statement. It's a statement on ecology and sustainability and the things that we consume. It may not be totally sort of landscape changing, no pun intended, but the idea that like we together we're creating this sort of archipelago of sort of habitat across the city is reassuring, and creating a sense of community around sort of those shared inherent political beliefs about consumption and conservation. So.
Archipelago, I like that. TPF. If you see that in some TPF messaging, you'll just turn a blind eye.
That's pretty damn cool.
Thanks for all your help and support with the garden tour, Frank and Rick, and there's several people here who really played a role. Jeff, Susan, and then, yeah, it's been really fun to see you tuning into Poppy Hour. Let's stay in touch for sure.
I think, did Jeff or Sean have an answer to this?
Okay. I think we're just waking up as a species. We've been asleep for too long, and Mother Nature has sent out her mycorrhizal fungi, and it's connecting to us and inoculating us and connecting us to everything that connects us together. And so I think of native plants, and I feel awake.
Awesome.
I have something to say. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Brenda.
Right, cool. I don't know if you can see me. I hope not, because I don't have on eyelashes. But
just see a photo of you.
All right. So anyway, native plants mean survival of the landscape, survival for different cultures, and native plants are memories. They're what our land looked like before anyone was here. They're memories of childhood. They're memories of being free. They're memories of just being in the outdoors and feeling cool and listening to birds. And a plant, just the scent can do that. So that's what native plants are to me.
Thank you, Brenda. Thanks for being on Poppy Hour last week too.
Problem.
And I think for me, it means community, not only the wonderful Theodore Payne community, but the neighbors that walk by and love what they see and smell, and they enjoy it so much. And they, it's almost like, they see it and they, well, how do I get to it? How do I have that for myself? And, we're able to say, we'll help you. We'll show you how. But they sure do notice it. And they just say, so many people, they say, I love your garden. I love your yard. I love your garden. And that's a wonderful thing to provide that for the neighborhood.
Yeah, I really like that point about time travel. I belong to a Facebook group for one of the native plant societies, and went to the Santa Fe Dam recreational area and took a bunch of photos, and sort of wrote that in their minds that this was the San Gabriel Valley of Muir and Lummis. And I saw these amazing Penstemon spectabilis, and I had to rush out there, and it was a really nice lens to kind of all right, is this the San Gabriel Valley of Muir? It did feel like a little bit of a time transport. It's pretty cool.
Totally.
I have an answer to the question. Sorry if there's background noise, but I'm reading Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy right now, and he paints a picture as someone who studies insects of just how badly we've shot ourselves in the foot in terms of our horticultural choices and our planting choices. But it is also really super hopeful. So native plants to me are something small that you can do if you're having a bad day, or if you just need to do something to feel like you're making a difference in the world. And I feel like every time we plant something, we're going towards that being the new normal of when people plant something, or when they have a new house. I think in 10 years, maybe people will go straight to native plants instead of going straight to a lawn or something like that.
We hope so. We definitely hope so.
I believe it.
Yeah. Well, we'll do it together. It's going to be a lot of people will be making that change, and everybody here is committed to it, which is awesome. I see Kathy.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us last week, Kathy.
Hi. Yeah, I'm so
We have two
sorry about
Cathys,
last
so
week.
There's two Cathys.
Oh, hey. I'm so sorry about last week. I had my neighbors start blowing, of course, like leaf blowers, right? Total pollution, noise pollution, and air pollution issues. Started blowing it right next to me as soon as I was on. So I'm glad to be back this week, and I know it's the last one. But native plants to me are super important because I almost feel like it's like this revisit of like things retro, right? What's old is new, right? Everybody loves to kind of, I think that this is a, native landscaping is our original landscaping, and we've gone away from it in the urban environment. We've built over, we've built over that landscape. We've built, parking lots, and we've lost that paradise that we had. And I think that, I find it great to, that LADWP is a partner with Theodore Payne Foundation on so many levels with the Native Plant Tour, with us, in the past attending a lot of the workshops that you guys offer there at the facilities, because it's an opportunity for our customers to recognize that, it's not just about California friendly, but it's also about native plants. They have this wonderful opportunity to take out turf and then to put in native plants, and that helps to not just beautify their home, but to help reestablish those plants in the urban environment, which is where we want to see them again.
Yeah, and it's so great to have the backing and support of large organizations like LADWP and MWD. We heard from Yvette. I see Teresa as well. I don't know if she wants to talk or not. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think just really quickly, I think what native plants mean to me, they've really helped me in my career in water, and also in my career as a civil servant and in public service. So just thinking about ways that we can talk about native plants in ways that everyone can digest them and really creatively and talk about these plants as if they're part of this bigger goal and bigger objective. So I think that's what native plants have meant to me in my career in marketing native plants. I know it sounds really strange, the concept, but definitely the messages behind why native plants are important. And I see that every day in the social media that we put out on behalf of Metropolitan.
Totally. So Kathy with a K, you got kind of cut off before, but.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's been several years since my garden was on the tour. It was a baby garden planted in 2010, and I was on the tour in 2011, 12, and 13. And it's all very big right now, and I know I need to be on the tour again. Right now, I'm looking at my desert willow tree, which is completely in bloom and looking fabulous. But although I'm not on the tour, in a while, I still have my signs up, and passersby who make the mistake of pausing in front of my house are subject to an informal semi-forced tour and encouragement to plant their own California natives. And anyway, just in the bird bath, I would say, I would definitely encourage people to put in the water feature, because that makes a tremendous difference, brings in all the birds.
Well, I think that's everybody I see. If anyone else has something to say, speak now before we end Poppy Hour for this season. Well,
I'm going to miss you guys. I'm going to miss you guys.
Miss
Well,
you too,
yeah, we'll be
Can't
back.
wait till we do this in person.
You know where to find us. Sun Valley is not far. We'll keep in touch on social media. We'll be hearing stuff. We'll probably do some other smaller, less complex YouTube little one-off things here and there, and hopefully do this again at some point when we feel like we have a moment to catch our breath. But it's really been an honor to be part of this with everybody. So many thanks, and thanks to Margaret and Philip and Andrew and all the folks at TPF for pulling it off. We did it. Good job, guys. Yeah.
We did.
Happy
This was really fun. I just want to say again, thank you all so much. Everyone who has joined us and continued to join us. And of course, Evan and Andrew and Brenda and Jenny and all the staff at Theodore Payne that are not only amazingly, keeping things running and allowing us to continue to get native plants in a pandemic, which I think is so healing and important and beautiful. But also have supported the online native plant garden tour, which was really like a new novel thing. And of course, Poppy Hour, which is another novel exploration. And this also, of course, really wouldn't be possible without the amazing guests that we've had this season and our sponsors. So just a huge gratitude to the Gottlieb Native Garden, Metropolitan Water District, and LA Department of Water and Power for sponsoring our entire season of Poppy Hour.
Thanks, guys.
Huge gratitude.
Woo-hoo! Thank you for allowing us to be a part of it.
All right, guys. Margaret, any final words before we sign off?
It's been a real pleasure and a wonderful experiment, and I hope everyone can enjoy the outdoors safely on Friday evenings moving forward. And I'm sure we will all meet again, and I look forward to that. So thanks, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, guys.
Happy Poppy Hour. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy summer.
Happy summer.